Welcome to the ThinkData Podcast, and today I'm joined by Tom Shapland. He is the product manager at LiveKit. They are an open source platform that's really redefining real-time voice and video with AI. Tom has what can only be described as a pretty unique background because he actually co-founded an agritech startup back in 2014, and then he's obviously now leading product in voice AI. So his journey is certainly anything but ordinary, but very, very relevant to this, the journey he's now on. We're going to dig into how large language models are reshaping voice agents, why the hardest part of the journey is the last 10%, and what it takes to go from coder to product leader. So Tom, yeah, good to have you on. So as I alluded to, you've obviously got a pretty unique background, highly technical, had your own journey as a founder yourself or a co-founder yourself. But what brought you to LiveKit first and foremost? And do you mind kind of bringing people up to speed with kind of who LiveKit are and specifically the problem it's targeting?
Yeah, great. I'm so excited to be here. And let's start with what LiveKit does. I think that would be a good entry point. So LiveKit is a platform for developers to build real-time interactive AI experiences. So imagine you want to build, as a developer, a product where the user is talking to a voice agent, talking to an LLM, and the LLM has to keep a natural, low latency conversation with the end user. We're a platform that helps you build that experience by orchestrating the turn taking and the audio transport and all these different aspects of building a real-time interactive experience. We also help developers build experiences where they talk to avatars. And this is part of, I think, what's so exciting about what we're building at LiveKit is we're building what really feels like the future. In the future, humans are going to interact with computers much less with keyboards and with their thumbs tapping on, tiny little screens. And instead, they're going to be interacting with computers with their voice. And we're building the infrastructure to enable these voice-first human-to-computer interactions. And that's kind of my first way of describing what LiveKit does, is to really try to describe like the bigger picture that we help developers build real-time interactive AI experiences. I can go a level deeper too, where we talk about kind of really what that means. And I think there's two parts to that. The first is that the company started as a open source media streaming platform. So this was back in the days of the pandemic, and the founders were looking for an open source way to build like real-time video experiences like we're having in this Riverside. And there just wasn't a good like open source way to do it. So they started building one. And then they built that for a few years and it was going well. And then all of a sudden this generative AI thing happened. And they got an inbound from OpenAI saying, hey, we really want to build an interactive voice mode for ChatGPT. And we saw Russ, our founder and CEO's blog post about, how he had kind of built an initial version of it. And they said that they tried out LiveKit and they really liked it. And they wanted to collaborate with us on building a interactive voice experience with ChatGPT. And that experience, or that collaboration with OpenAI, led to us building a open source, or that led to us figuring out how to build a framework for real-time media transport with like an AI as part of the call. And then we open sourced that, and that became really the project that unlocked this next wave of growth for us, which is we have this open source framework for people to build voice agents and avatar agents. It's mostly voice agents is where we're seeing most of our traffic. And that has just been this incredible, it's been such a ride ever since that.
Yeah. No, it is clear. I think it's a fascinating use case. And as we touched on kind of off air, I think, whether we look at kind of a more of a lower level, obviously, or the AI note-taking tools out there at the moment, obviously, but you're going deeper into this, but actually how people converse and communicate. And are we talking about commands? Are we talking about general interaction with a kind of, human to computer? Because obviously people listening here, obviously there is this big shift where we sometimes you don't know who you're talking to, do you? Sometimes there is an AI agent, is it a human? So from more of a high level standpoint, what does that mean in practice in terms of the future, in terms of what we're going to start to see about people interacting with voice agents?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I like to describe it in three categories. So the three categories are in terms of what we'll see with voice experiences, voice computer experiences are as follows. The first one is voice agents that are replacing existing business workflows. The second is new, novel, more narrative or companion type experiences that were not possible before the age of LLMs. And then the final type, and this is maybe more of a catch-all, is just human to voice user interfaces. So for this category, I like to think of like, in San Francisco, we already have these Waymos that are self-driving. And I think that, it's going to make sense for people to be talking to robots like Waymo or humanoid type robots rather than like trying to interact with them with an app on their phone or something like that. So just digging a little bit deeper into each one of those categories, in our work with OpenAI, that's a great example of a companion type app that we've helped build, or kind of a narrative type app that people have built using LiveKit, where it's something where there isn't like a clear necessary objective that the user has in terms of like, I need to get this thing from this company, or like I'm trying to get this action done. It's very open-ended. And I think we're going to see more and more of those types of more and more internet traffic of users talking to AIs in real time for all sorts of different types of experiences. Then going back to the business, replacing business workflows, the example I always like to bring up the most is lead qualification, because we've seen a lot of traction in lead qualification among our users. So a lot of businesses, they'll generate a ton of leads. They'll pay for leads, right? They'll pay for some sort of advertising. They'll get a bunch of leads, but they don't have the manpower, right, the staff to go through and call each lead to figure out if that lead is actually a qualified buyer. Are they in the right, do they have the various aspects that would make them actually a qualified lead? And so we're seeing a lot of growth in voice agents that will call the leads and see if they live in the right state, or they meet these different, whatever qualifications for the buyer. And then if they do, pass them off right away to a human that can actually try to sell the product to them.
Interesting.
And then that third category, I think I already touched upon it, but we're already starting to work in robotics at LiveKit and helping to transport audio and video for some of the really cool, neat new robot projects that people are building out there. And I just think that that's going to be, there's going to be a big future for people interacting with robots in different shapes and forms, and they'll be interacting with them with their voice.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? I was fortunate enough to go to VivaTech a few months ago, and actually I was in Paris, and I was really surprised how much of a focus from all the exhibitors, across all walks of life, with your pre-seed, early concept to actually live versions of products, how much of a focus was on the interactive robotics side. So it was crazy, how you're conversing. They were looking at automation within automotive, and how you're interacting with your car, and how you're interacting with the delivery truck that turns up. And actually I came away thinking that there's more robotics and more two-way conversations happening, or beginning to happen, than ever before. And do you tie that down to kind of the adoption of LLMs, and obviously how fundamentally more available they are now in terms of how voice AI works? And what I mean by that is it making voice agents more capable than ever before?
What an interesting question. Like the history of voice AI.
Yeah.
So voice AI has been like the history of voice AI, and like what has changed that we're seeing this boom in voice AI now.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about, I think maybe the place to start with that is to acknowledge that voice AI has been around for a while. So like we've had Alexa devices, Siri for a long time. And also, we've talked to, every consumer has talked to some sort of phone tree, some sort of IVR that tried to, bring them through a business process. And also, like, I've also, before the voice AI boom, had experiences where it wasn't a phone tree I was talking to, but it wasn't asking me to press buttons.
No.
But it was clearly trying to guide me through a process, and it was a robot, or a bot, I should say. And how those old systems were built, they were based on what they call intent-based systems or rule-based systems. So you can imagine a flow chart, and each node or each box in that flow chart is some question that you have for the user, and then you evaluate the answer from the user and then move the user to the next node, either to this node over here or that node over there. And it all relied on this pretty rigid system where you had to be able to narrowly define what the space was that the user could be asking about, or that you could be asking the user about, and then pick up on the intent of what they're saying to really move them in the right direction to the next node. And it was very rigid and just
Highly
not very
frustrating.
yeah, yes, as a user, highly frustrating. We've had those experiences, and these systems are cool. Amazon's Poly, I think it's, what did they call it again? I thought Poly. Now I can't remember now. As soon as I started saying it, but Amazon has a system like this. They're really cool. They use neat machine learning models to try to recognize that intent. But really, what changed was the emergence of LLMs and their ability to better understand the intent of what someone's trying to say, and also kind of have a more natural conversation with someone. I think it's those two aspects, like the conversational aspect of LLMs and also their intent recognitions part. You might say also the tool calling is pretty fundamental too, but I want to keep it simple and just say they're just so much better at recognizing intents. So now you can build a voice agent system that has a general, a description of what you're trying to do for the user, and the user doesn't feel so boxed in. If they say something in slightly a different way than it was pre-programmed to recognize, the LLM is still going to recognize it, and the conversation will continue to be able to move forward. But in the old days, if somebody said something in a weird way that wasn't nearly hard-coded, I know these weren't hard-coded systems, but nearly hard-coded to recognize, then the conversation just failed. And I think that's really what's unlocking this, and why business, ultimately the voice agent developer's customer, is having an experience with, or is demoing the product or using it on a small part of their existing business call volume and saying, oh my God, this is working. This is amazing. So I think that's really what's changed things.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think go back to those the old systems, and actually in there they were quite ahead of their time. And actually, I remember speaking to, I think it was just going to the bank, even just saying what your date of birth was, and after a while, it became so frustrated. You always end up just pressing the button to kind of move forward. But with the organisations you're speaking to now, and obviously taking OpenAI out of the equation, say those kind of more customer-led organizations, was there the big reason for bringing in more advanced voice AI? And the reason I asked the question is a lot of talk about displacement and about jobs, and how companies are bringing in AI to replace them. And contact centers a huge one where everyone say actually this will be displaced. Is a lot of it around replacement, displacement, or is it just more efficiency? Are they trying to become more efficient, engage more customers, or are they generally looking at mandating and saying actually we can save cost in the long run?
Yeah. So we're how many minutes into the podcast, and we've touched upon a hot political subject in some way. So my perspective was,
maybe keep it more high level from your assumption, your perception, because I do appreciate it's probably a harder question to answer. But I guess it's really interesting because what you're doing, ultimately, the product's phenomenal. It doesn't require a human to converse with a customer or whoever that person may be. And so in your experience, do you think long term this will become the new norm for us, for the likes of you and me? We call our bank and we will be speaking to an AI, or do you think there'll always need to be a human at the end of the button you're pressing?
I think for many of the use cases now where we are used to talking to a human when we call a business, the first line of defense, the first thing we will engage with is a voice agent. And this is the part that I think is more of an interesting take on it, is that we will prefer it because we know we can just get it done and we don't have to be super polite. We can just be like, hey, give me this thing. And I think this is consistent with the history of technology. There's a lot of work that people don't like doing. I mean, so much of society has moved out of agricultural work because working in farm fields is hard. People don't want to do it. And we're seeing similar things with our customers with people building our platform, where they're building a voice agent, and the people at the company are saying, this is great. This is the voice agent now does the part of the job that I didn't like, so that I get to focus more on the part of the job that I do like. So an example of this is we work with some people are building voice agents that are trying to basically broker deals. So they're trying to they buy something and then they try to sell it. And the part that people at those companies don't like is the selling it, because it's just like you're just haggling all day and it's just such a repetitive conversation. Whereas the buying of the product is more interesting to the human, because they get to try to work out a deal and they get to try to get like better product and more product, the product that's actually in demand right now. And that part is much more interesting to a human. And so like one of our customers has built this voice agent that's just doing the selling part, just the haggling. And the employees at the company think it's great, because it's like, oh, I no longer have to haggle all day. Instead, I can like try to focus on this part of my career that's really interesting to me.
Yeah.
And like we have so many different stories like that. Just one more quick story about that, because I think it's such a good one, is we work with 9/11 call centers, and it's absolutely critical that a human gets to talk to another human when they're really in an emergency. But unfortunately, it can be really hard for humans to get in touch with another human and for emergencies, for two reasons. One is that, well, it's the same reason. It's that these call centers are understaffed. And it is two reasons. I misspoke. The one is the call center is understaffed, and two, people call 911 for all sorts of reasons that aren't an emergency. Like the neighbor's dog is barking. I'm trying to call the police on my neighbor or whatever. And so what one of our customers is building is a voice agent that I'm not exactly sure what step it comes in, but it basically handles the non-emergencies. It quickly gets those out of the way so that the emergencies can go to the human and we can have a real human-to-human interaction about something that's really important.
That is really, and people listening here, that's such a good use case of, the positive adoption of the voice AI. And I think, high availability is always going to be available, but equally can quite intuitively sift through the calls that are important, but equally the calls that might not necessarily require a human. Yeah, and I'm all for that. And it's interesting. There is evolution, isn't it? Actually, with as much displacement as we talk about, there's opportunities being created as well. So you're completely right. Some people, do they want to be answering the phone all day, or do they want to be progressing in other areas? Then this is going to free them up to do that. So, I like that. And I'm interested to touch on a quote you once said about you kind of build 80% of voice AI agents in 5 minutes, but the last 10% takes your entire career. What did you mean by that? Because I think it's really interesting is the last stretch of that is obviously the most difficult, but why is that? And what did he mean by that statement?
I think that it's probably generally applies to all product management, and that you can get a proof of concept up and going pretty quickly, and you can show that to a few users and they like it. But to really build something that people love, where you deeply understand what the user's need is and you address that need in a beautiful and simple way, that they just forget that the problem ever existed. They forget the old way they had to solve it, and now it's just something that they just feel they need. And it's just part of what they do. Like that's a lifetime of work. And in addition, there's also with any product that you build, when you create something, you also create a bunch of problems. Like there's always so many edge cases that come up whenever you bring something new into the world. And so it's just also a lifetime of work to track down all those edge cases and make sure that, I guess that's the two sides of product management. One is like, the positive, more rosy story to tell about like getting to build and design something that's more like intuition led, and like you get to like, it's beautiful, and what you built is something you like point to. But so much of the work is also the other side of the coin, where it's just like there's so many like little things you didn't anticipate and you got to play whack-a-mole on all those little different things and make sure that you're building something that actually is a good experience for your users.
Yeah, no, I like that. And obviously, how much of a factor do you think your background has had to the success of, your current role at LiveKit? And what I mean by that is you've come from a pretty technical hands-on background. You've built your own products, AI products. You've launched your own company. You've come into a hyper-growth business in a really cutting-edge space. How do you think that's kind of set you up for success here?
I don't think anything can prepare you for stepping in onto a rocket ship. It has been It has been so much fun, but every day at the end of the day, I like will reflect on it and be like, oh, I did that dumb. That was a dumb way to do that. And like, oh, I should have done this differently over here. And I also feel like there's just so much to learn not just in building voice agents. Like if everything just froze right now, I would have so much to learn still, but it's also constantly changing. So I'll be learning from customers about a new way to do things. And so I never feel like an expert. And that's kind of a funny thing that we talk about internally at LiveKit is some of our users who have a lot of traffic will come to us and be like, hey, how do we solve this problem? You guys are the expert. And we kind of look around at each other and we're like, what do you mean
Oh,
that we're the expert? We feel like we're on a treadmill of trying to keep up and learn. And you're actually the expert. You're the one that's actually built a bot that has 1 million hours a week that's talking to people. You tell us.
yeah.
So that was one point, is like nothing can prepare you for stepping on a rocket ship. And then the other part, I do think that the experience of building an ag tech company was really helpful. I think so much of the role of I'm just reflecting on it for a moment. It's an interesting market to be in. There's a natural resistance to technology and changing the way you do things in agriculture. I think that's part of why people go into farming, is they go into farming because they want to feel like a farmer. They want to drive a truck. They want to kick the soil. They don't go into farming because they want to, stare at a computer screen all day. And I was trying to bring technology to them that wasn't physical technology. It was software, and it required looking at a screen, and it was at times challenging. There was a group that was certainly the early adopters who I am deeply grateful for the time that I've spent with them. But there's also a large portion of that population that just sort of was only doing it because their boss wanted them to try it out. And working with that type of user is challenging, and it makes you, I don't know, it hones or it doesn't hone, but it gives you a perspective on the fact that bringing anything new to the world is going to be a lot of work, even if people really want it, and you have to approach it in the right ways.
It's the education piece, isn't it? I think what you guys are doing at LiveKit and the way you've talked through it here is there's a demand, there's obviously there's current products in place, and the more, as you rightly said, we're just evolving more as a race. We're interacting more and want to interact more with people that, whether it's AI or not, we want an answer now. We want to get those kind of response rates up and move on with our life. So actually it's just creating efficiencies. And I'm really interested to kind of close things off with, obviously what LiveKit's doing and the way it's set the business up is quite unique. It's obviously giving developers and companies the opportunity to build out their own kind of voice systems. But what's next for LiveKit in terms of the evolution of the product and where you see voice AI going now?
So one way to answer that is to just talk about our near-term roadmap. We want to be the one platform that people can go to build, test, deploy, and scale their voice and avatar AI experience product. And we are at this stage, I think we've checked a couple of those boxes well, but we're still, it still feels like we're putting what's the expression you sometimes hear? We're still putting like the wings on the plane as it's taking off. So like we just launched our agent hosting service. So in the past, people would use our open source framework to build a voice agent, and then they would have to go host it on AWS or Render. And we finally just released our service where they can host that agent, that code on LiveKit. And that's one step closer to being like the platform where people can build, test, deploy, and scale their agents. But we're still on that journey. So that's sort of the term roadmap. And then the longer term roadmap, I think, is the things that are interesting to think about are, I don't know, I can give you like the one answer is like, yeah, there's gonna be a lot of money made in business to business use cases for voice agents around customer support and that sort of stuff, which is actually kind of it is true. I certainly believe it, but it doesn't speak to me as much personally as just how much fun it is to build with voice agents. Like I feel like an artist with like a palette, and it's this really interesting palette of colors. And I just think people are going to come up with the most interesting and neat things now that we're building a new way for people to interact with computers. Like it's just like there's so many interesting examples of what people are building. I just think we're going to see people interacting with computers in fun and interesting in surprising ways. So let me give you like a random example of something I've been meaning to build. That's like, because like every day I come up with like 5 things where it's like, oh, I want to build that. That would be fun. No, I'll talk about one that my coworker built. One that my coworker built just
Oh, nice.
recently was one where we work with this company. We have a plugin into LiveKit with this company called 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐷𝐪a. And 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫 is an avatar company, and all you have to do is upload a picture and it creates a talking avatar. And it's just so neat. And so to demo it, my
Wow.
coworker Ben built this thing where you log in, or you don't log in, you hit a website and you talk to your instant clone. You click a button and it takes a picture of you from the session, and then immediately creates an AI avatar of you that you can start talking to. And it's just an example of like something creative
Wow.
and like kind of weird and different that I think we're going to see all sorts of just interesting human-computer interactions that come out of this new age of real-time AI experiences.
Love that. Yeah, I'll have to have a play on that after. Now you've got my curious mind and needs to go and play with it. I think we're in an amazing inflection point. I think with the hype or whatever we are around AI at the moment, I think we've steadied the ship, and I think there are the use cases, the stuff you're talking about, what LiveKit are doing, the benefit it brings to the consumer, the customer, but equally businesses themselves. I think it's fascinating, and voice is obviously front and center of that. So I'm really, really grateful for you to come on. I think it's some really interesting backstories, and I'm assuming on LiveKit's site people can take a look and have a play around with it and see this in practice, whether you're a developer or an engineer listening to this, or just someone who's curious. Can people take a look at some of the case studies and understand what you're doing?
Yeah, so if you check out LiveKit on Twitter, you'll see some of the demos that my coworker Shane has built that are really fun demos of like the sorts of things you can build with voice agents. And so that's one neat, good place for people to start. The other, and this is what I encourage everyone listening to do, is it's just so much fun to build with these. And even if you're not, our platform is code first, but in the age of Claude, it's really easy to unblock yourself when you get stuck on a coding problem. And if you go to our website and just click start building, we'll walk you through building your first agent, and right there on your computer you'll be talking to an LLM that you designed, that you gave the prompt for. And it's just fun. Like you're gonna see your imagination take off and come up with all sorts of neat things that you
Oh, I
could
love
be
that.
building for your company or
Yeah, no, I
for
really
your
appreciate your
own
time,
company.
Tom, this morning. Oh,
Sorry, there's a little buffer there. I just think the
yeah,
imagination
no,
will
I
start
think
going. It was great. Yeah, yeah.
no, the fact you said it was code first, but people can kind of unblock themselves and play around with it was interesting, because there are those kind of armchair fans who do listen to this who aren't technical and actually just want to see it in practice. So I'm sure people's creative minds, like the 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐷𝐪as, like those kind of things, people think, oh, well, what can I do with this? No, thanks again, Tom, this morning. It's been really insightful, and you shared a huge amount of information that I think people are going to be quick to check you guys out. So we'll be sure to tag you and obviously LiveKit when we go live. For anyone listening here, check out Tom and obviously LiveKit. They're doing some fascinating work in this space. So thanks again, Tom.
So much fun being on the show. Thank you for having me, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. A pleasure.